And greetings to everyone. In this session, we will look at animals and the law and focus on the issues with current legislation, namely the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960, which will be presented by our esteemed speaker, Mr. Ambuj Aggarwal. Ambuj is a lawyer with 17 years of experience, practicing primarily at the courts in New Delhi. He studied law at the National Law University, Bhopal. He has counseled and advised various clients, including 2G scam case and FIPB scam and other high-profile cases. And he has turned vegan in 2018 and thus started his journey for animals. He advises FIAPO on various animal welfare and animal rights issues and was instrumental in filing the case challenging the provisions of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act that permit use of animals in circuses before the Delhi High Court. He also supports animal welfare activities and animal rights activism in many ways through philanthropy. He will shed light on the flaws in the current legislation, as well as the fundamental issue of how animals are viewed from the standpoint of their worth to humans. So before we begin, I just have a request that audience can kindly post their questions in the chat box if there are any questions coming in so that we can address them later. And now, without further ado, I invite Ambuj to please step up and educate us on animals and the laws.
Thanks, Varnika, for the introduction. I am truly honored to be speaking at the India for Animals conference. Hello, friends. I am to speak today on the topic of animals and the law. As we all know, the main law in India, which governs the field of crimes against animals, is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960. Going forward, I'll refer to it as the PCA. Now, before I delve into the specific lacunae in the PCA, I'll just take a few minutes to address the core of the problem. And that, according to me, is how we humans see animals. Why do I call it the core of the problem? Because laws are made to address evolving problems and situations in human society. The point that I'm trying to make is that laws are made to address the problems as the society perceives it. We see animals as objects of use to us, something from which we derive some value, be it in the form of milk, meat, leather, wool, fur, honey, scientific and medical experiments for the sake of humans, entertainment for humans, religious sacrifice of animals for the satisfaction of humans, use of animals in military, etc., etc. The list is really endless. Do you know what is common in all of these examples? The commonality in all of these is that none of the human acts towards animals to derive these benefits are a crime or cruelty under the PCA. My point being, howsoever gruesome or violent the act of humans towards animals, if such violence ends up deriving any benefit for humans which the public at large enjoys, we just don't see it as a problem. And that is the core of the issue. So when the PCA was enacted to address the problem of violence against animals, this problem excluded and still excludes, in the minds of public at large, all the consumption and use of animals by humans and the pain and suffering that this use causes to animals, which the PCA indirectly refers to as necessary pain and suffering. Because the PCA, from its preamble onwards, is very clear that it addresses only the unnecessary pain and suffering to animals. For those who aren't aware with the preamble of the PCA, it says an act to prevent the infliction of unnecessary pain or suffering on animals. As is obvious, just by the use of that one word unnecessary, PCA excludes from its application almost all the pain and suffering that the animals have to endure on the account of a benefit that we derive out of them. The forms, as I had mentioned before, that is milk, meat, leather, etc., etc. Now, I do not have any hard data with me, but if I have to make a guess, the pain and suffering that violence against animals that PCA excludes from its application would definitely be more than 95% of all the violence that animals face from humans, more like 98, 99%. And that, as I said, is the core of the problem. All the flaws in the law emerge from this approach of how we look at animals as something of value to us or something from which we derive benefit out of. And therefore, All of the acts, however brutally violent to animals, be it killing them them for food or experimenting on them and putting them through immense agony and torture, are excluded from the purview of the law itself by simply putting all of this under the umbrella of necessary pain and suffering. In a just world, or aspiring for a just world for animals, humans have to first start recognizing animals for their independent existence, for their inherent intrinsic worth as equal stakeholders with equal rights to exist on Earth without any interference from humans. Now, within its limited sphere of application, also, the PCA has several lacunae. I will just address the most basic ones and the changes that they need. First and foremost, and the most well-known lacunae in the PCA is the quantum of punishment under Section 11 of the PCA. The fines up to rupees 50 for first offense and up to rupees 100 or 3 months imprisonment or both for the second or subsequent offense currently prescribed under Section 11 of PCA hardly constitute any deterrence at all. If you really ask me, it's like a license to kill. Rupees 50 has no value today for it to constitute any meaningful deterrence at all. The PCA miserably fails here, and this needs to change with a minimum sentence of imprisonment for every offense. The second most relevant lacunae is the non-cognizability of offenses under PCA, as mentioned under Section 31. Very briefly, cognizability of an offense determines whether an FIR can be registered for an offense leading to police investigation and whether a police officer can arrest without a warrant. Under the Indian Penal Code and other criminal laws, several crimes are not made cognizable offenses and are left to be prosecuted by individual complainants and victims, treating them as minor crimes, not affecting the society at large and more individual specific. However, the significant difference, which the PCA doesn't account for, between crimes against humans on one hand and crimes against animals on the other hand, is that animals cannot prosecute or defend themselves against any crime, be it minor or major. They are wholly dependent on humans and society at large to prosecute the crimes against them. Point is, no animal can defend himself or herself against any crime, be it small, say for example, beating by the owner of an animal, which is non-cognizable under the PCA currently, or a big offense, say killing for fun, which is cognizable under the PCA. Similarly, no animal can prosecute for himself or herself, and no human being will take interest in filing a private complaint and prosecuting a case if an accused, for example, is beating up his own dog or cow, which are currently non-cognizable offense under the PCA. Hence, all offenses under PCA should be made cognizable so that all cruelty against animals can be prosecuted by state and thus effectively addressed. Presently, the PCA only makes 3 out of 15 broad acts considered as cruel under Section 11 to be cognizable offense, for which a FIR can be registered and police can investigate. And this needs to change, and all crimes and offenses under the PCA should be made cognizable. Now, coming to address what I initially called the core of the problem and its solution, that is recognition of animals for their independent existence as equal stakeholders with equal rights to exist on Earth without any interference from humans, there are certain fundamental changes that need to be made in the PCA. Firstly, statutory recognition of right to life of animals. As it currently stands, the PCA prescribes certain duties on humans towards animals without specifically granting or recognizing the right to life of animals and their right to live freely without any human interference or human cruelty. PCA should be amended to recognize and statutorily provide an absolute right to life of animals to live without any human interference or human cruelty, as also recognized by Honorable Supreme Court in the AWBI versus Nagaraja case. Secondly, PCA should be amended to delete the word unnecessary, as there is no violence or cruelty against animals that is necessary. Acts of cruelty must be punishable per se. In the same context, all the exceptions to cruelty should be deleted. On to a very practical aspect of reporting crimes against animals, medical reports of private veterinarians should also be made should be given statutory recognition and be relied upon to be used for prosecutions of crimes against animals. This is extremely important due to the lack of availability of government veterinarians at the time of lodging of cases of animal cruelty that require reports from veterinarians. Now that brings me to my conclusion, and I would only like to conclude by saying that the human society needs to realize and acknowledge that animals have an independent right to exist on earth without any interference or use by humans, and only this realization will lead to a real change in the life of animals on earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambuj. Thank you for educating us so well. And I'm confident that the audience has gained a perspective and a better understanding of animal laws and loopholes today. So we have been receiving some good questions. So allow me to share them with you. One question is, to how to present your points to the police officer when you are going to register a case of animal cruelty. So generally, even the people and even the police is unaware of the laws that, there is a law for animal also, and police do not take it seriously. So there's a question on it that what can be done when they go to police station, how to present the points to the police officer so they take the case seriously and register the case.
Well, two things here. One, firstly, the complainant needs to be very patient. See, we all need to understand that you as a complainant may be very, not just well aware, you may be very compassionate to animals, but general public at large is not always. So keep that point in mind first. Secondly, before you go to the police station, at least, because, being aware of the fact that the police is not necessarily always very open to, prosecuting cases for animals, you'll have to make yourself very aware, very well aware of the law. So read up on the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, consult a, animals lawyer, consult an animals organization, if possible, an animal welfare organization, or any animal protection organization nearby. Take their help to first understand the law, and if possible, take their lawyer with yourself to the police station, and then again, as I said, be patient with the police officers and explain them what the incident is all about, and how the animal in concern has faced violence, from humans, etc. So these two basic points: be aware of the law, take help from animal protection organizations, and be patient.
Thank you, Ambuj. So I would like to say to audience to read the law and then go to police station, and first be aware yourself and then make the police station, the SHO aware. So thank you, Ambuj. The another question is, can a case be registered for street animal also, or is it only for pet animals? Can a legal action be taken for cruelty against a street animal?
Yes. So the specific answer to that is yes. Legal action can be taken for street animals, but unfortunately, as it happens, and as I had mentioned in my speech also, out of the 15 broad acts of cruelty mentioned under Section 11 of the PCA, only 3 are cognizable. So while you can lodge an FIR for only those 3 specific acts of cruelty under Section 11, the rest 12, as of now, at least till the PCA is amended, you'll have to prosecute them yourself. So yes, an action can be taken for street animals as well, but the prosecution has to be in the individual capacity of the complainant, and the police will not investigate.
So could you also share some points on it if a cruelty has happened with a street dog? So what could be the points which can be taken care of by the complainant to take the action?
So I would say, be very specific, be very clear, and be very specific of facts, and keep in mind that criminal law in motion relies on evidence. So when you are narrating an event, it's better always to write that entire episode in the form of a complaint on paper, note down the specific acts of cruelty, who committed, and always, as I said, always bear in mind what is the evidence in support of that cruelty. So just, as I said, so make a narration, be very clear, be very specific on facts, and bear in mind what is the evidence that you will lead both to the police officer and in court at a later stage to prove that act of cruelty. So keep these 2 points in mind, and then you should be good.
Okay. Thank you, Ambuj. So, Ambuj, it's a very specific question, a small question. Do animals have fundamental rights?
Well, unfortunately not. At this point of time, animals only have statutory rights under the PCA, as the Honorable Supreme Court in Nagaraja case has also held. Of course, the Supreme Court has also gone on to say that, and urged, in fact, the Parliament to upgrade the status of animal rights from statutory rights to fundamental rights and constitutional rights. But only at this stage, animals only have statutory rights under the PCA. That's all.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. So a very interesting question is coming up. It says that in United Kingdom, a bill has been introduced. It is Animal Welfare Sentience Bill. So they are coming with Animal Sentience Bill they are coming up with. So animal welfare where vertebrate animals will be recognized as a sentient beings as per the bill. So do you think the similar bill should be introduced in India also?
Yes, of course. I would also, go on to say that India, and in fact, as recognized in the Nagaraja case also, India has a history of compassion. Indian history, Indian mythology has a history of compassion towards animals. So I would say, I would urge the Indian parliamentarians to go a step further and not just recognize sentience in the vertebrate animals, but into the animal kingdom at large, recognize the sentience to anyone, any being that suffers pain, that suffers pain and suffering. His pain and suffering and sentience should be recognized by law, and should be, they should have equal rights as equal stakeholders, as I said in my speech, to exist freely on earth.
Yes, thank you. So Ambuj, a question is from the student who is from NLSIU Bangalore. So he's saying that he's really interested in animal rights and law. So he want to know what are the carriers in the animal law. What are the impactful he's saying that what are the carrier options in the field of animal law, and he wants such type of options that the carrier is also impactful financially also.
Well, unfortunately, at this point of time, given the Indian context and the Indian welfare sector, I am not so sure if a career in animal rights as an animal rights lawyer would be great, financially also. You'll have to somewhere find a balance, while working for animals. I would, of course, like to urge you and inspire a lot of people to, dedicate their lives for animal protection, to be an animal rights lawyer. But I would also say, bear in mind that, while working for animal rights, you'll have to somewhere balance your profession, to also do work, because the animal rights, when you intend to help an animal, so it's common sense to understand that the animal does not have the capacity to pay you. Animal will not be able to pay you a fee for the service you render, or the case you prosecute, etc. So you'll have to balance your desire to be an animal rights lawyer, with the financial reality of the world, that, and simultaneously pursue a profession which, be gainfully employed, is what I'm trying to say.
So yeah, you are saying like we can also work for animal laws, and side by side we can also maybe have some other options.
Yes. So I'm not saying that what I do is the perfect example of an animal rights lawyer, but I also parallelly work along with my animal rights work. I also parallelly do other litigation to sustain myself. So that's all I'm trying to say, that it's great to feel for animals and pursue animal rights, but do understand the financial reality that the animals are not going to pay you. So pursue animal rights in a way that you can sustain it in the long term.
Yes. Okay. So in a smart way. Got it. I hope the answer is clear to the student. So Ambuj, again, coming to the cruelty part, there's a question, generally what happens, police refuses to register the complaint
Yeah.
or the exactly FIR. So what can be done in this case if the police is refusing to file a case?
Say, so as I tried to explain, the law itself, the PCA itself makes only 3 offenses out of the 15 in section 11 cognizable. So the police is within its right to refuse to register an offense, which is not part of those 3 specific acts. So in which case you will have to, it's not as if there is no remedy. You will have to pursue that case yourself as a complainant in the court of law. So if the police refuses to register a case, I mean, you first of all, you need to be clear if the offense in particular falls within the 3 categories as mentioned under section 31 of PCA and is cognizable or not. If it is cognizable, of course, the police is mandated to register an FIR. If the police refuses, you can go to court and ask for a police investigation. But if the offense is non-cognizable, you are at liberty and the law requires you to file a private complaint and pursue it as a complaint case.
So this I will, there's a second part to this question. First was what to do if police is not registering. And the second question actually you have also answered. It says that is a complaint to a magistrate is a good idea. So
yes. So if the police so 3 scenarios here. One, it's a cognizable case, you go to the police and they register an offense. Best case scenario. If it's a cognizable case and you go to the police and they refuse to register an FIR, you can approach a magistrate under section 156(3), or you can file a complaint under section 202 of CRPC and directly prosecute the case, or upon your complaint to the magistrate may then direct the police to conduct a police investigation if it's a cognizable case.
Okay. Thank you, Ambuj. So one more question is, as per your expertise, so how would you think animal rights and are recognized under Indian law under Indian law or by the court rulings? How the animal welfare and animal rights are recognized?
See, the most landmark judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court is the Nagaraja case, of course, of 2014, where I would say for the first time, the Supreme Court has given such categorical recognition of, animal rights under the PCA. And in fact, the Supreme Court has now gone ahead in the same Nagaraja case, and also other than, just enumerating the rights to animals under section 3 and section 11, the Supreme Court has gone ahead and also included 5 freedoms which are generally recognized across the globe, which is freedom from hunger, thirst and malnutrition, freedom from fear and distress, freedom from physical and thermal discomfort, freedom from pain, injury and disease, and freedom to express normal patterns of behavior as the rights guaranteed to, the Supreme Court has now read all of these freedoms within the provisions of section 3 and 11 of the PCA, and said that animals also have these rights. So the Nagaraja case, as I said, is the landmark case on animal protection and animal rights.
Yes, and court has nowadays in India, I think they are giving more judgments, like the state high courts has also come with such judgments. So yes, I think we are on our way to to recognize animal rights and animal welfare more.
Absolutely. Slowly. We are on our way, but I'd also like to say that along with the courts recognizing animal rights, it's like a top-down ruling. I would call it a top-down rulings, but society at large has to change enough, as I said also in my speech, to understand animal pain and suffering, and that has to lead to the parliaments and the state legislatures to make laws for the protection of animals and to give them rights.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Ambuj. So there is one question. It says that an environmental lawyer can develop as an animal rights lawyer, isn't it? So he wants to know the interchangeability of environment law and the animal laws. What is the balancing factor and how can it work?
Well, I'm not an environment's lawyer, but all I can say is, when you think of animals, animals are essentially, part of the environment. So, when you work as when you work as an environment lawyer, you can of course dabble into the field of animal rights as well, and your experience as an environment rights lawyer or environment lawyer would help you further your practice in animal rights.
Yes. So there's one question, Ambuj, that why the punishment is so low, like in the PCA or even in the IPC, why the punishment of cruelty is only 10 rupees, 20 rupees, and 50 rupees? Why do you think it is like that?
Well, I think I covered a bit of this in my speech also. The problem is our problem is of approach that we humans have towards animals. So the human society today, only looks towards animals as objects of use to us. They are not an animal's suffering and pain and suffering is not recognized. Animals are not recognized for their independent intrinsic worth. And when we don't value a sentient being for his independent existence, this legislation is only really a welfare legislation trying to do some good to animals. That's point one. And point two, you'll also need to realize that this act was passed in 1960, more than about 60 years back. So at that point of time, just imagine the value of rupees 50 at that point of time. So 60 years hence, from 1960, we continue to have the same punishment, which, as I said, is really no punishment, no effective deterrence at all. It's as if, go and have a, can of Coke is the same as to kill an animal today. So the problem is twofold. One, of the approach that we have towards animals, and two, to realize that this act was, for the parliament and for the public at large to realize that this act was passed more than 60 years back, and the punishment still continues to be the same, and it's not, in keeping with the times.
Right, exactly. So, and also, I think the lack of implementation. So coming from the low fine and everything, what is the reason for even the lack of implementation of these acts? Because already, the fine and the imprisonment is less, and on top of there is no even implementation. So why is it that, and what can be done, for better implementation of the act?
See, the lack of implementation also, I would say, emanates from the two basic facts. One is that criminal law serves two purposes really. One is the deterrent part, which is the punishment provided for any offense. Be it an offense against animals or humans, etc. So there is one deterrent aspect, that the punishment should act as a deterrence for public at large not to commit something, not to do an act. And the second part is the investigation and prosecution part. Unfortunately, in case of animals, there is lacunae in the law on both aspects. So the first part, as I explained, the punishment prescribed under the law itself is so low that it is really no deterrence at all. Coming to the investigation and prosecution part, again, as I said, so the first basic element of investigation and prosecution is cognizability of offenses. So there also, as we saw, the offenses are themselves not cognizable, and only 3 out of the 15. And even for the ones which are cognizable, let's say, for example, there is not enough sensitization of the police forces and the public at large. So let's say, a lot of people today would go and would witness a lot of violence against animals, beating up of a dog or beating up of a cow, etc., etc. But there is not enough sensitization in the public at large to step ahead and take action. So that is what I feel is the, apart from the law aspect, that's the main culprit, I would say. Enough sensitization in the society and, of course, in the government machinery to take action for animals.
Okay, thank you, Ambuj. There is one more question on the harassment of the people, who take care of animals. Like in a society, there are dog feeders, and there are people who are against it, not to feed street dogs. And then a tension built up between these two groups. So how these situations can be tackled? Because as per the AWBI guidelines and even the judgments of the court, the nobody can say no to the street dogs have their right to food and they can be feeded.
Yes.
But many times the situation arises and the main issue is lost. The main issue of dog feeding is lost, and some other issues erupt from it.
Yes.
So how can this situation be tackled?
See, there are two approaches that I have seen people take. Two approaches. One is a very animal rights approach, which is also not wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong, but what I would like to focus on and to talk about is to do a balancing act. See, we need to realize that, let's suppose you are an animal feeder and you are fighting for the right of an animal. That animal is a free street animal. You fight for the right of the animal, right to feed that animal. But if you fight about it, what people often forget is that you will not be there to look after the animal all the time. So instead of just fighting about the issue, as I said, it's important to do a balancing act and to sensitize the public at large about the sentience of animals, that they are also beings who need food to survive, and also uh, who need food to survive, and they also are, I would say, creatures of nature. They also need to exist. They have their independent existence. So what I'm trying to say here is that instead of only taking an animal rights approach and fighting about it, people should realize that it's better to change the society from within by sensitization, talking to your neighbors, talking to public at large. And also at times it's important for us to understand their concerns. I am not saying for a moment that their concerns would be absolutely valid or they are in their right to say that you cannot feed an animal, but to a balancing act. If let's say you live in a residential complex, you can instead of feeding the dog inside the complex, if it's, let's say, a gated community, you could step out. You can do a balancing act which also takes care of the need of the animal and of the human society, so that your animal rights approach does not become a threat to the life of an animal, because you wouldn't, and you as the feeder wouldn't be there to protect the animal 24/7. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
Yes, and I think we as a citizen, we also have a duty to towards environment and everything. So when we are feeding the dog, we are feeding a street dog, this is our duty to clean the space,
Yes.
and not to create any nuisance for others, because if this happens then it creates another issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you are proactive, both as a feeder and to take responsibility for that, what that will have, what that will do for you is really build a long-term relationship with your neighbors, with the public at large, because they will know that this man is doing a good thing and also taking concern. He's also concerned about our needs. So that will, I would say, build a long-term relationship for and also good for the animal.
Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you, Ambuj, so much. And now I think I will just take a last question, and it's so our audience knows that the PCA Act is going to be amended. So they are just saying that even though draft has gone, everything has gone, why it is not getting amended from the parliament?
So only the government can answer that, because I don't think the amended PCA bill has been tabled before the parliament, not to my knowledge. See, we all need to build up a movement for animals, is all I can say.
Yes.
Maybe the government has its own compulsions, but
pressure for it.
Yeah, we need to create a public movement. Especially, I would especially like to take this opportunity to urge the student community at large. Students studying in colleges and schools. You are the future of the country. You should build a momentum within your own friends, your colleges. You should, the movement for animals should become so visible to the parliamentarians, to the society, to the adults, that they feel pressurized. They feel the need that, yes, the right to animals have to be protected and PCA has to be amended. Till that happens, unfortunately the situation will remain the same. So the point is, we need to push the public at large. We need to create awareness for animal rights. That's all.
Thank you so much, Ambuj. And as I said that it was the last question, but there's a last question from my side, which I want to ask you. So, which you have also shared, in your speech, but I am again asking you that which is the in the amendment, what do you think is the most important change that is needed in the PCA? Is it the fine? Is it the imprisonment? Like, and even do you think if the fine is or the imprisonment is increased, will it make any difference? What difference will it make?
See, so far as the PCA is concerned, I do feel that, I mean, as I had addressed in my speech, the PCA in its application really excludes about 98-99% of animal suffering. So for that aspect to be, covered within the PCA, it's a long drawn process where the society itself has to change. But for immediate purposes, I think one, punishment of course needs to increase. It should really amount to a deterrence, a sentence of imprisonment. And two, I would say the PCA definitely needs to incorporate a statutory right to animals, giving them a right to life. I mean, that recognition needs to come in the PCA for some meaningful change, to come for animals.
Okay. Yes. So Ambuj, thank you so much. And it was I think, really intriguing session for all of us. And I just want to express my heartful appreciation and gratitude to you and to our wonderful participants for taking the time to attend the session. And I wish everyone a wonderful day ahead. And thank you so much. And over to Sanjana.
Thank you, Varnika. Thank you, Fiapo, for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you.